What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to our live show recapping the Steelers' Week 16 defeat by the Kansas City Chiefs 36-10. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co-host, Shane Kubis. Shane, one, happy holidays. Two,
Oh, of course, yeah. Happy
I don't
holidays.
know how really happy we can be after today's result.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before we went live just now. If you would have told us in the offseason or the preseason that we're going to lose to the Chiefs 36-10, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. I wouldn't have been like, obviously, like it would suck to hear that and be like, oh, well, I mean, I guess the defense didn't have a good day and Ben
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get the offense going. But this was just, I mean, this was never close. This wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
competitive football game at any point.
No.
And the fact that we're still very much in a position to possibly make the playoffs makes me kind of just hope that we don't and we'll get more into that. But this is just kind of one of those games where you just get smacked in the face and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted, like, at every point, Tony Romo was saying, like, oh, like, nothing else could go wrong, and then more things would go wrong for the Steelers. And not to mention Tony Romo, like, I don't get, like, I don't know if this is in his contract with CBS where he is like, he can't say the game is over until
Yeah.
the clock hits quadruple zeros, or maybe he has to wait, like, X amount of hours, until, if your discussion of the game lasts longer than 4 hours, please consult a doctor.
Right, that type of thing. It's
Because he's just like, oh, this game is like, that might be the backbreaker. It's like, dude, that was the 36 score. There's 5 minutes left. The game has been over. The CBS cut away from the game because
they literally were like, we're not watching this anymore.
Yeah,
like,
they cut away from this game. And granted, it was not in time for this, but essentially because the Raiders-Broncos game was more competitive, which it was.
Yeah.
But by the time they cut over to it, it was the Raiders kneeling it 3 times within the 2-minute warning. And they stayed on that as long as they could. Like, they showed the whole thing. They came back after break to show, like, fans celebrating, the win, and then to show all, like, the thanks to this company for providing wardrobe. Here's our CBS schedule of 60 minutes and 5 hours of the equalizer
or whatever.
And then they went back to the Steelers game, at which point Chad Henne was the quarterback, and we even got some Mason Rudolph reps in there.
So, I got some Mason Rudolph, some Benny Snell reps.
Yeah.
Exactly what we want to see this late in the season.
So it was just, and like I said, like, pretty much everything almost everything you could imagine that could go wrong went wrong. We can start with, Deontay's self-inflicted fumble, which, like, it was just, like, so funny in just that he was, like, just, like, trying to switch his hands and just dropped it. Like, I think I've never seen anything like that, but I could be wrong.
The last time I remember seeing a play like that was, I think it was Dalvin Cook when he was at Florida State.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, actually.
They were playing whoever, and he was running on the sideline, and he just all of a sudden kind of just threw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it went out of bounds, luckily for him. But he kind of it looked kind of just like he didn't want it anymore and just threw it into the sideline.
Yep, that's pretty much what happened.
For no reason whatsoever. But, like, with Deontay, the problem is, like, first of all, the guy is so dynamic after the catch. I know he always is trying to do stuff, and sometimes he does too much, and he ends up, like, getting 5 yards on a 7-yard pass, like, stuff like that. But, like, you just can't fumble the ball when no one touches you. You just can't do it. I don't care what the reason for it is. There's just no way. Like, unless you're telling me you became all of a sudden paralyzed from the waist up in the middle of the play without anyone touching you, you shouldn't fumble the football. Like, that's just kind of what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, and, obviously the Chiefs recovered that. Then you had Ben's fumble on a botched play action reverse screen, which, like, why is that play even in the playbook at that point?
It reminds me of when you're playing Madden, especially like the last couple Maddens, and you try to run a play like that where you have the fake handoff as a part of the play action.
And you just want to abort it, like, immediately.
You can't do it because you're going to get sacked before the play is over because it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And it's like I watched it happen on, like, I could have replicated that play myself if I wanted to, like, right now. And I'm like, what is why are we calling this play right now? There's no way they're not gonna respect the run game against a team that's losing by 30 points. There's no reason for them to care. Like Najee had some great plays down the stretch. We'll talk about
Mhm.
some individual players, but like they didn't need to care about if we ran the football. They didn't need to care about it. Like they all I had to do was sit there and wait for for Ben to eventually maybe find somebody and try to throw it to him, and that was about it.
Yeah, and I mean, to their credit, the Chiefs had this game,
Yeah,
predicted game plan perfectly. They didn't respect Ben's ability to throw, so they just were like, "All right, we'll stop the run, and that's pretty much all we need to do." And they were successful in that for most of the game, at least to a point where
yeah,
they could allow the Steelers to run the ball, and it didn't matter. They did not respect Ben throwing the ball one bit, and he had the early interception where the ball just sailed on him. And I think that I'm not saying that the wind was to blame for all of his throws because they were saying like winds were gusting 23 to 30 miles an hour, which that is definitely going to affect some throws. It affected the kicking game for both teams a good bit. But at this point in his career, like Ben does not have the physical arm strength to put on throws that will prevent the wind from affecting it. There
yeah.
were a lot of short throws that I think he was just inaccurate on, but there were a lot of his deeper throws just kind of got messed up by the wind, and he just can't, and he just can't overcome it, which is a problem.
Yeah, we both actually. I tweeted about it, and then right afterwards, I saw you tweet about it from your personal account. Like he just doesn't have the arm strength to throw through those types of conditions
Hmm.
anymore, right? And
Hmm.
like, there's not a ton of guys who are going to be super successful at that. I mean, it's not like everybody has this like rocket arm in the NFL, but especially on anything where he has to put any amount of loft on it or any amount
Hmm.
of touch on it, it's just gonna get away from him and this type of thing. And with Mahomes, I mean, you could tell like some of his passes were just pinpoint, even down the field. Like he just a completely different level of arm talent. I mean, even Ben at his best wasn't anything quite like what we see from some guys now, but it's still a very noticeable decline in the past few years, including this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to think if there were any other. I mean, the other ridiculous play I can think of was the taunting on Ray, which again, like the players do need to be more cognizant of the fact that they are seemingly calling these very easily. But I saw Ray turn around to him, say one word, and they threw the flag.
This is
And
my problem with the rule in general. And we've talked about this in the past. Is
mhm,
this is a very high tension, high emotion game in general, high
mhm,
emotion sport. There's going to be moments where guys get a little bit chippy with each other, where they talk trash, whatever. And I don't think that it should be policed so heavily that that type of thing causes an actual
mhm.
effect on the field. Now, obviously, legitimate like showing up somebody and like really rubbing it in, like ridiculous stuff, like
Yeah,
stuff that's just over the top.
like what Claypool did to Breland a few weeks ago. If you're gonna call, and like there was kind of a back and forth there, but if you're gonna call that, I'm fine with it because you are
Right,
contacting another player.
right,
You're demonstrably doing something to him and towards him. It looked
right.
like McLeod maybe said a word, and it could have been maybe a really bad word, but
Maybe and like
and then the refs had a pretty extensive conference after it, so and that might have been to determine because it was on a third down that they converted, but then it's dead
right.
ball, so that might have been why. But also, it should have just been like, this is not good for the game. Like this is
It's
not
not.
no,
It's one thing. It's one more thing players have to think about
yeah.
that they don't have to think about. Like they know, every player knows like you can't run up on somebody and like bash into their helmet and yell at them and like this like very egregious stuff. This is all that's always been called, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Those
Vontaze
types of
Burfict is out
things.
of the league now, so we're kind of past that.
Yeah, right. But like it just gets to a point where like if you're gonna police it that hard, you're going to see guys get penalties whenever they really didn't do enough to me,
Hmm.
to think that they should deserve one. That's just
Yeah.
gonna be what happens.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
I'm just so that was, and again, like I think there is a point where the players do have to be like, all right, listen, like I can't do anything. I just won't do anything because just to be safe. And I would prefer them to demonstrate sometimes just because it's more fun that way. But excuse me, whatever. I'm trying to think of anything else that was catastrophically bad or hilarious
I
that I missed
mean,
out on.
just the tackling by the Steelers.
Well, okay, so I I'm not as mad about that as some people might be. I think it
Okay.
was bad at points, but also like the Chiefs players specialize in their run after the catch ability and being great athletes. And yes, the Steelers overran some tackles sometimes, but like the play that Pringle made to get into the end zone, I think that's more on him than it is on the Steelers. Like that's just him making a lot of great cuts.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, the ones that stand out to me that I really just was like, "What are we doing?" was the Clyde Edwards-Helaire run, where
yeah, that was
like
yeah, I forgot about
what
that.
are like what are we?
I think
Just
that
two
was
guys had dead
yeah.
to
I
rights,
think
and
that
you
was a
don't get them
case
back.
of like, so Spillane hits him first, and Highsmith I think was the other one coming in.
Something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's happened where like the way that Spillane bounced off Edwards Hilaire kind of put him in Highsmith's pass, so Highsmith kind of tackled him as opposed to, which again that's like a bang bang thing, so just kind of like that's frustrating.
Yeah, like that sucked, and like the Hardman touchdown on the sideline.
Where there was very clear holding on Joe Hayden.
Yeah, that was true. Like Hayden, to his credit, he's always been like this. He played very physical from the corner spot all day, and he
Yes.
just got no help from anyone behind him.
Yeah.
Most of the guys.
Yeah, I mean Edmonds
Like,
came flying in, and then Hardman made him miss, which was again I think more of a good play by
that's
Hardman.
fine, but then like Spillane was late getting over there to try to get him out
it's
of
Robert
bounds.
Spillane. What do you expect?
But it's just everything. I'm watching this game. Like, this team just doesn't play defense at the level that I'm expecting them to play,
Yeah.
even with the guys they have in there.
Yeah.
And like they're adding insult to already existing injuries, literally.
Yes,
like
quite,
they're literally doing that.
Yeah.
And the fact that, how many tackles did Minka have today? Was it what, like
I think it was 9.
again?
I want to say 9.
Let me see. It was 12 total, 5 solo. Like, again, he cannot continue to be at the top of this team's tackle leaderboards every week. He just can't. Like, and that's what we're seeing consistently. Like, yeah, what, 14 tackles last or something stupid like that last week? And like, a lot of people talk about it, but like, one of the reasons why he hasn't been as well thought of this year by a lot of fans is because he doesn't have the turnover numbers, the splash plays, and a lot of that is because he's basically making up for, several guys who just can't play at the level that he needs them to play to be able to do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And that's really a big thing that has to be addressed at some point in the near future if we want him to be the type of impact player that we want him to be.
I do want to say this, though. I think, and granted, I think this is partially due to the fact of what the Chiefs want to do on offense.
Yeah.
But I did not think that the run defense was, one, as bad as it has been in the last few weeks,
as bad, no.
And 2, was not the main reason they lost this game.
No, it wasn't nearly as egregiously bad as it's been,
No.
right? Like, that's the biggest thing is like, especially in the first half of the game, I didn't see a whole lot of really bad plays on defense.
Yeah, there weren't those like 10-yard gashes that were so easy. And like when the players got the ball carrier lined up, and they I think they did a good job of tackling there. Once it was like kind of in space down the field where there were problems, which that's obviously going to happen. But when they were in the box and had to like tackle the running back, I thought they did a much better job of that than they had the previous few weeks. Granted, not to the level where it needs to be a competent NFL defense, but it was an improvement from where it's been the last few weeks.
Yeah, it wasn't a continuous downhill train that it has been.
Right.
But like you said, the biggest problem in the first, especially just in the first half where things really got out of hand, was just Mahomes was completely unbothered. Like, he was unbothered by this team whatsoever. Now, again, Watts playing through cracked ribs. He still had a couple plays where he really put pressure on Mahomes.
Yeah,
but still not enough. Like,
John Simon out there wearing a number 38 jersey as an edge rusher, which foul,
I'm like,
just
what are we,
illegal.
What are we doing?
I think this is the dark side of kind of expanded jersey number rules that now we have to deal with John Simon wearing a number 38 jersey as an edge rusher, which was just disgusting. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times where they just could not get pressure. And I think part of it was because they were dropped. They did not want to blitz him, so they couldn't get pressure with 4. And the Chiefs did a great job of scheming it up such that they, double teamed Hayward and Watt. And then, they didn't call like any holdings. I saw a few plays where they could have definitely done it. They have done it in the past. So that was part of the issue. But yeah, I mean, and then, the problem is, when there isn't that pressure, it causes problems on the back end. So you saw, a lot of big passing plays. You saw that big one to Gore down the sideline, which kind of I don't even want to call it a bust, but that was just because like the routes just kept developing because there wasn't any pressure. The touchdown to Pringle in the back of the end zone was kind of the same thing. Where if you're giving any I will say almost any quarterback, because there were some doozies of quarterbacks playing this week across the NFL. That, if you give them that much time, they might not make that throw, so, but if you give Patrick Mahomes that much time, he's definitely going to make those throws. And, he was awesome today. He was, kind of the Patrick Mahomes you expect. So,
yeah, we gave him every opportunity to just kind of make plays that he wanted to make, and his guys had time to get open and figure stuff out. Like, I was hoping that Kelsey being out would be more of an impact than it was, but when you give him that much time, there's just no chance. Like, you can't defend him normally, let alone with giving him all the time he wants to get guys down the field where they need to be. So
yeah, a lot of opportunities by finding guys underneath, which that is kind of what you have to do with the Chiefs. You cover deep, make sure you don't get those big plays, which they hit a few of those, but not too many. Besides that one to Gore, their longest completion was only 22 yards, I think. So it's that was, we kind of knew that was going to be the case. Tyreek Hill, I think he was hurt, so they didn't really force him to play a lot.
right.
But if you come into this game planning like, all right, we're going to force Byron Pringle to beat us, he's gonna, and he beats you. That's like, all right,
Then he
that's
beats
what it
us.
is.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
about it.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just I think like this is just like I said, a game that you can tell like the talent difference between these two teams, right? And the depth, and like again, a guy like Byron Pringle coming up and having a 2-touchdown day, making up for
Mhm.
Kelsey being out and Hill not playing much, like you said, and Gore, who is their third string running back, comes
Mhm.
out and has what I think he had over 120 yards from scrimmage or something like that, or close to
That
that, or close
sounds about right.
roughly, yeah,
He had
116 yards.
yeah.
Yeah, total. And I mean, he had the 50-yard pass play like we talked about a few minutes ago. Like it, when the back end players of your roster are doing what they're doing for what the Chiefs did. Not that Pringle's been a relatively
He's a
important
starter
piece
for
for them.
them.
Yeah, but like when guys that normally aren't those
Mhm.
top end of the roster players come out and have games like they had,
Mhm.
that's kind of shows you the difference between the talent level on this team versus the Chiefs. So
Yeah, absolutely. Do we want to talk about Matt Canada? Well,
other
I mean,
than
should we talk about him? I don't really want to
well,
talk about him, but we
so
should.
other than the fact that he should have been left in, like he should be left in Kansas City.
Yeah, it's so bad.
The problem with this too, and like it would be bad enough if we were just that bad, right? Like if we were just awful and we had no
Mhm.
chance to be successful, I could live with that, right? Because I
Yep.
understand that.
Mhm.
But I've seen this team have moments of brilliance on offense. A lot of that being when Ben is back there controlling things and running the 2 minute and stuff
Yeah,
like
I
that.
mean, there were times where Ben had some really he did have some nice throws today, like
Yeah.
those nice throws to Claypool that he kind
Yeah,
of strung
exactly.
together.
Yeah.
There were times where he found Deontay underneath. But like anytime it was like almost anytime they had one good play, it was almost immediately followed by a, you know, complete failure, whether it be a fumble or interception or whatever. It was just every time there was one good play, it was like bam, turnover. So just couldn't get
Exactly.
anything going.
And like just some of the play call decisions, like we both talked about, 4th and 1 toss play.
Yeah, there's a lot of just bad memories about the Steelers
What
doing that from across multiple
just
coaching staffs.
what are we doing with
Don't
this?
get it, especially for a team that does not have a speed type running back.
Right. Like if you're gonna
With an
run the
offensive line
football,
that you have
right,
not been comfortable running the ball behind for
it-
most of the season.
if you're getting like that's my problem with it too, is like you shouldn't run the ball in the situation anyway with this team, right? You just
Mhm.
shouldn't. But if you're
Mhm.
going to, why are we stretching? Why are we throwing out tosses
Yeah.
with our 240-pound running back? What are we
Mhm.
doing? I just don't. And then the 3rd and 10 screenplay where we probably could have hit Johnson for a touchdown if he wanted to.
Yep.
Uh, like it's just these things that I just don't understand what the thought process is. You're losing to a team that is one of the highest scoring offenses of the last 5 years now,
Mhm.
basically. And you're running 3rd and 10 screens when you're down 17 points. What is the point of this? Like, what point are
Yeah.
you trying to make?
And
Like,
like you're running and like, let's say like, it is, you kind of want to give the defense something they're not expecting, but you're throwing it to a guy who like granted can make guys miss, both with agility and physicality and Harris, but like Johnson can do that. Like
yeah,
he can kind of make those crazy plays happen on 3rd and 10. And you're electing not to throw to him, especially when you have the numbers advantage to that side. So just ridiculous there. The flea flicker that led to the interception. We talked about the play action end around screen debacle. The other one and this was more on Ben, was I think it was 3rd and 10
hmm
where maybe it was 3rd and 5, and they had the two drag routes,
oh,
running
where
meshes,
he hit,
and he was just staring down Ray the whole time.
jeez.
Meanwhile, Johnson's running the other way. He's more wide open. The wider side of the field is that way. That's going to Ben's right, where it's ostensibly easier for him to throw.
Yes,
And he makes the harder throw to McLeod, who gets tackled short of the line to gain, which is just like I I understand the point that McLeod gets the reps in the slot because he knows that position well, and I get that point of it.
yeah.
I don't understand why so much of this offense is centered around force feeding Ray McLeod touches.
I again, like he's been a nice story, and I'm glad that he's been able to make an impact outside of special teams because the special teams haven't been great. But
He
like,
should be and again, like let's say like all things are healthy. You have Freiermuth in the game, you have all your maybe not Juju because he's been out for a while, but
Right.
um, he should be your fifth option
Yeah, fifth option.
on
Yeah,
the field at any
realistically.
given time. You
Yeah.
have Johnson, Claypool, Freiermuth, Harris, then McLeod.
And then you could argue where's James Washington at?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
depending on the
well,
week.
again, I think
Like
that's part of the whole slot thing is
right.
like
Yeah, I
they
get
don't.
that.
Yeah, so like that's that. I'm kind of
And that's
shuttling that to
fine.
the
Yeah,
side.
that's fine. But like, there's a lot of conversation about that every week of like, what are we doing with him? Like, is
Yeah,
there a reason why Washington is not on the field or why he's not getting targets? Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say that he's this great receiver or anything like that
no.
because he's a good player,
hmm
and he has experience with Ben. So
hmm
why are we not? I mean,
I
like,
mean, he's
it
never
just
had that
doesn't.
chemistry with Ben for what it's worth.
No, but like still, he at least like he's made a couple really big plays the
Yeah.
past few weeks.
Yes.
Like, give him a shot to do something at least if we're not gonna use other guys effectively anyway. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just it's hard to watch this
I
team.
think one of the more official Steelers reporters also mentioned that a few weeks ago when Claypool gets that taunting penalty, he gets pulled for at least a series.
Yeah,
When McLeod does the same, he doesn't get pulled, which is strange. And again, I think that's part of the
yeah.
experience in the slot. But like at this point, like maybe get Claypool and Johnson some more reps in the slot, please.
Especially Claypool, because like
Yeah.
at this point, it's just easier to get him the football that way.
Yeah.
It just is. Like, he's made some spectacular catches down the sidelines. He's done that occasionally, but he's still more effective when you just get him the ball in open space and let him just run with the football. He's
hmm
still just at this point in his career, he's just better with that.
He did.
And like,
I think, and I think this is what we'll talk about next. Is
yeah,
I thought he had a very good game,
yeah,
Chase Claypool.
mm,
That the fact that like the one shot they really took down the middle of the field was to him,
mm-hmm,
and it was kind of a combat catch. He's not really combat, but like he's in the air, he's kind of falling, like he has to follow the catch. And I think it's just good to see him like he focuses on the ball through the rep and brings in the ball, and that was right. I think it was right after another big catch down the sideline.
mm-hmm.
So it's good to see him kind of last week I think he didn't have any catches. The week before was his really bad week. And this week I thought he put together a really nice game, which is good to see.
Yeah, I'm glad to see because the thing I wanted to see from him was I just didn't want to see him spiral.
Yeah.
Right. Like I didn't want the pressure and all the just negativity around his play
Yeah.
against the Vikings. I just didn't want that to spiral, and it didn't, which is what I'm glad to see.
Yeah. Another bright spot, Akella Witherspoon. Didn't really hear from him much today, which that's what you want. He had that pass breakup on Josh Gordon. Some people got mad about him flexing after breaking up the pass, which I think that is somewhat fair, but I also think that unlike Claypool, it is in a situation where it does not matter because it forces a fourth down. That is a big play. That's you do have to, you do have to kind of let these guys, when you get your wins, you have to appreciate them. So I think it's even,
extent, yeah.
it's like, I think Belichick there's like this clip of Belichick saying something to that effect where it's like, listen, if you make like a big play, like you need to celebrate because that means you did your job right.
Yeah, and it helps your team get up for what's happening
right
next.
And also like if you just start like doing that and then kind of just like I liked because then it shows that like the guys do care and it's like all right this is like that's like a big play for me, like this is helpful for the team, I am caring, so I'm okay with that as long as it doesn't affect again the on-field outcome, which it did with Claypool a few weeks ago.
For sure.
Other bright spots, I thought Najee had a really nice day.
Overall,
yeah, I mean again I think a lot of that was kind of the Chiefs allowing them to run, but I think it's good for his confidence to get some of those big plays. I think he was bouncing outside a few too many times again. But it was productive, in these situations, that's kind of what you have to do. But he was, running guys over, making guys miss, hurdled a guy at one point. So,
yeah, he had what he's shown a lot of the ability to do, which I think is going to hopefully serve him well into the future, is that he makes some of the most spectacular, like 4, 5, 6 yard runs ever.
Mm-hmm.
And like being able to create those types of plays when normally it'd be a 0 gain or a 1 yard gain.
Mm-hmm.
If he ever can get behind a line, allows him to actually just do what he needs to do at least and have a chance to make people miss after he gets the football, then those tougher plays become less of a problem because he can do that type of stuff. He can get you those 4 or 5 yards. So
yeah, I still do think he needs to just be more aggressive,
yes.
just like taking the original hole and just get
making it, either opening it himself if he has to, or whatever the case may be.
I think there were a lot of people saying like, oh, like the Steelers should have just like taken Javonte Williams in the second round instead, if he had been there or whatever. But I think because Javonte Williams is having a very good season, I did like him a lot in the draft process, but he's not creating those plays. Like the Broncos are blessed with a pretty good offensive line, despite not having a real passing
Especially
game.
run blocking line too.
Exactly, with Mike Munchak.
Yeah.
That they are able to create a lot of those holes for him, from what I understand. So I do not think that if they just swapped the running backs, I think Najee would be having an incredible season, but I don't think Javonte Williams would be having, much of a season at all.
See, that's the problem. Like, so much of like running back value is tied to the structure of your team. If you can bring in a super talented rookie back behind a either good to great offensive line, you get the Javonte Williams type seasons. You get the Ezekiel Elliott seasons whenever he like his rookie season.
Yeah.
That's what you get because you get this super talented player behind a line that can let him use his gifts to the best of his ability. Whereas with Harris, like if you put an average running back behind this line, I mean, it's not going to get, there's no chance they'll get any sort of production out of it. Whereas he's at least able to make some plays occasionally. It's not always going to be the case, though. Okay. Seems like Mitch pieced out on me. I'm not sure if he just has some technical difficulties or what. But I guess we'll give him a second to see if he's back. See, Brandon was sending some messages to us here.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
I was like trying to like click between tabs, and for some reason it like drug the Twitter or the Twitter link to like the tab that I had StreamYard open on. So it was just like, you're gonna get rid of StreamYard now. So that wasn't cool.
Now you're on Twitter.
Yeah, but now I'm back. But yeah, I mean that was all good from Najee. I like to see that. Other bright spot, I guess, was Corliss Waitman, the punter.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was booting some. I mean, especially with the wind and the position, like, I mean, I don't know. The punting game has just been so bad, and like I hate to say it with Presley because obviously, like, condolences to him and his family with what they dealt with, especially being Christmas morning with his father passing. But it's unfortunate because I feel like, especially considering just his performance so far this year, and then on top of seeing that we just brought in a guy and he all of a sudden booms punts, like his best case scenario is he's in the competition, I'm assuming, going into next year. And I mean, he has all the talent and ability to win that competition, and be the punter, but it's going to have to be a lot better than what we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Waitman had that many opportunities because Steelers kind of had to just start going for it.
But the ones he did have, I mean, I didn't see
2 punts for 121 yards, average 60 yards a punt. One was a touchback, but still very good. So yeah, I mean, that was nice to see. I really felt bad. I mean, I felt bad for Presley Garvin doubly because it's like, all right, like, you had this very sad family thing go on, and then it's like, all right, we're going to leave you home, so you can kind of deal with that. And then some guy comes in and just does your job way better than you have done in the past few weeks. So it's just like, oh man, this is just nothing coming up for Presley. So I don't know what they're going to do with him for a season. And another rookie that I think we should talk about in terms of his future moving forward is Kendrick Green, who had another bad performance.
Yeah.
To put it lightly. I think that, I see some people that are like, all right, they just need to cut bait and get rid of him. And
that's, you can't.
I mean, one, I don't think you should do that.
No.
And two, I don't think the Steelers will, because they're a notoriously patient franchise. Like, I mean, obviously you can talk about the head coaches. You can talk about, guys like Limas Swede in the past. You can talk about even Chris Boswell, who, his bad season, they were like, all right, we're going to stick with you. And I think he's rewarded. He's had some kind of weird kicks these last few weeks, but I think that's kind of been more of a weather thing.
Yeah.
Just kind of circumstance, not really him being a bad kicker.
Yeah.
But, I do think that they'll stick it out with him, at least for next season. Maybe they do switch him to guard. They try to figure something out. But at this point, that is just looking like a missed pick. They just did not evaluate him correctly in that position well. And the Steelers are really suffering for it.
Yeah, I still don't understand going him instead of Menarez from
Miners.
Miners. Yeah, I never can remember his name. Mm-hmm. But I was with the Broncos. Like, he just I think he's just a better player coming out. Frankly, I mean, that's just kind of the end game of it. But I just think that he also would be able to play center and stay there if we need him to. But like, I still think what we've talked about the past couple of weeks, where a move to guard, I think is his best chance to stick in the league, period, but also have a chance to actually develop into a starting caliber player, is going to be a guard if they want him to work out. But just depends on what they try to do at center position if they aren't going to keep him there.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because like the NFL, like on field, the center position is so important.
Yeah,
just in terms of setting protections, in terms of just locking down the interior, and yet the NFL just does not value centers highly in the draft. You
They
know,
don't. No.
there's kind of a clear number one center this year in Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa, who
Yeah.
like some people say he's like a top 10 talent in this class, but like a lot of people will say, okay, he's probably gonna be like a mid to late first round pick, which I just don't understand. Like this is a crucially important position for
It just
success.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like because even Humphrey, like I had him as like a mid to late first this past
Yeah.
draft. That's
And
where I
I
had him at.
think there was something about an injury for him, but I
Maybe,
could
but
be
like
wrong.
even then, it's
But
like
yeah, like
if he was able to play, his
yeah.
last year,
Mhm.
and he was clearly he hasn't had any lingering issues from whatever it may have been. I mean, he's been one of the best centers in the NFL this year.
Yeah.
It's just like again, like that position especially. We've seen teams that excel at that position. I mean, especially like Jason Kelsey, who's been the standard for how long there.
I mean, the
Like
Steelers know what it is to have a
yeah,
great
and
center.
Pouncey too. Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
we know how important that is, and the fact that we took a guy who doesn't have his most experience at center to
Mhm.
replace Pouncey, and not even as like a project guy, but a guy who had to come in basically and play immediately, just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
It just doesn't.
there's been a lot made of Tomlin's comments about like drafting an NFL ready center
Yeah,
and then saying that like Green is not that guy, but it's just like those statements are completely incongruous with each other because I just said that was I think that's just a miss by them that they'll have to own.
Yeah.
So like we said, I think for most of the season we expected the Steelers to lose this game.
Yeah.
And they obviously did. But there are 2 weeks left in the season, 2 games against divisional opponents. Arguably the Steelers' 2 biggest rivals. Next game is Monday night against the Browns, the last home game of the season. Then on the road against the Ravens for the final game. And at this point, I think the Steelers do decently control their own destiny. Those games I think are winnable, given that the Browns have not looked good in recent weeks. The Ravens have also been not looking good, and for both teams, that's been a COVID and injury problem. The Bengals have to face the Chiefs next week, and then they get the Browns. The Ravens have the Rams next week, and then they get the Steelers. So those 2 teams could go 1-1. The Steelers essentially need to go 2-0 to have really a shot at the playoffs. But it's going to come down to the very end of it, it seems.
And like we definitely can talk about this a little bit, but like I've kind of decided at this point, and it was kind of already going to be this way regardless, unless we actually came out and like beat the Chiefs and not just played well against them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care that much if this team makes the playoffs.
No,
like I just don't.
I don't. This team does not deserve to make the playoffs. They're very clearly not one of the best 7 teams in their conference. And granted, like there's not a ton of good teams in the conference,
especially in the AFC. Like it's clearly, especially during this win streak, the Chiefs have re-established themselves as the team to beat in the AFC for a reason. I mean, they're the most talented team. They have, if not the definitely, if not the most talented, one of the 2 or 3 most talented players in the sport with Mahomes. Like you just can't. There's no teams that are both healthy enough and talented enough at this point to actually claim that they are as good or better than the Chiefs. Like that's just kind of where it's at.
Honestly, at this point, these last 2 seasons have really kind of illustrated the folly that was adding a 7th playoff team, because this year you'll get some amalgamation of the Steelers, the Ravens, possibly the Browns, possibly the Raiders,
Dolphins, maybe,
the Dolphins, even So like any of those teams could be the 7th team. In the NFC, it's going to be like the Saints, who don't have a quarterback, or I think the Falcons still have a shot.
Technically, yeah. The Eagles, I think, are in the driver's seat.
I think the Eagles might get the 6th seed. Like they're good. They're too good.
That's the thing, is like they're as an overall team, like they could end up being not even the 7th seed, but I think they are currently as a 7th seed. But,
and then like the 49ers, like that other team. So it's just like
I mean, depending on which side of the pillow Garoppolo slept on is going to determine whether or not they're good or not. So it's like, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, and last year, you had the Bears in the Nickelodeon game. And then I can't remember
MVP for
I can't remember who was the 7th seed in the AFC last year.
7th seed, I want to say, wasn't the Browns, was it?
No, because I don't think the Steelers were the 2 seed.
No, that's right, we were. So it would have been, man, who was the 7th seed last
I'll look it up now. 2020 NFL playoffs.
I can't remember.
Yeah. But like as we're saying, like it's just ridiculous that they added this game, because they just don't need that many teams. Let's see. Where's the seeding? It might have been here we go, bracket. It was the Colts.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because they just
ended up losing to Buffalo and by a field goal.
Yeah.
So I mean, they were actually decent. But
they were
the other one was Chicago. So that's just
Yeah.
ridiculous. But this brings me to a question. I actually we'll talk about kind of whether I tweeted this, like, I am waffling between, like, do I want this team to make the playoffs because it would be funny
You're right. Yeah,
to
that's
essentially
part of
watch
it.
them get their stuff run by probably the Patriots, or not really barley by the Titans, who would be healthy by then. They'd probably have AJ Brown
Maybe
and
Derrick
Derrick Henry
Henry.
back.
Yeah, maybe Derrick Henry. Yeah.
So they would probably just destroy the Steelers. Or do I want them to miss the playoffs, so they can get a slightly higher draft pick and they don't have to be an embarrassment on national television. So I'm still waiting on that decision. But the other interesting part of it is that, so in the final week of the season, the Steelers will play the Ravens and the Bengals and the Browns will play each other. And if the next few weeks go the way that I think is pretty fair to predict, where the Bengals lose to the Chiefs and the Steelers beat the Browns, ostensibly, if the Steelers beat the Ravens, the Browns and the Bengals will control whether the Steelers make the playoffs. And ostensibly, because if the Bengals beat the Browns, which they probably should,
they win the division.
And the Steelers win, the Bengals win the division. Yeah. If the Browns beat the Bengals and the Steelers win or lose, if the Browns beat the Bengals and the Steelers win, the Steelers will be the fourth seed in the AFC North champion.
Yeah, they win the division. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's kind of pretty much the only way the Steelers can make it, unless kind of really chaos just takes over
like
everything.
the cleanest path to the postseason is better division outright.
So, and I'm not sure how many of them will hear this, but we'll post this somewhere such that they can. Is if you are a Browns fan in Week 18, do you want to win that game where you are facing the Bengals, and if you win, you put the Steelers into the playoffs? If you lose, you lose the game, and the Bengals make the playoffs as the AFC North champion.
I think the problem with it is, like, there's more bad blood between us and the Browns.
100%.
So, like, you would imagine that,
even though it's like the Don Draper, what's his face meme from Mad Men, where he's like, I forget what the young guy says to him, where he's like, I don't even think about you.
Right. Basically, like, there's more bad blood between us and the Browns than there is, especially just from like a just getting whooped standpoint for most of the last.
Which is again ridiculous considering the Browns and the Bengals are in-state rivals.
Right, but it just the Bengals have been bad enough at stretches where it's like they can kind of there's not as much bad blood there because Bengals and Browns have been trading off being one of the two worst teams, right? So, like, the fact that I don't think it would mean nearly as much to Browns fans negatively wise if the Bengals win the division and make the playoffs as it would for us to go back to the playoffs as the division winner after losing to them last year in the playoffs. So I have to assume the Browns fans will be like, yeah, let's drop that game and send the Steelers home. I have to assume so.
And I do sense that a lot of Browns fans are frustrated with the team, mostly frustrated with Baker Mayfield, but I think they would be perfectly willing to root for this team to lose, their team to lose, such that it hurts the Steelers.
And I mean, you're already pretty much, I mean, unless even more something chaotic happen, I think they're pretty much eliminated anyway.
Yeah,
so,
I
like,
don't
just get that higher draft pick at this point. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I'll see. I'm gonna play around with this playoffs predictor and see if if anything crazy can happen, such that they could have a shot at it. This is okay. Let's see. They beat the Steelers. Okay, so if something's happened, like if they could. This is just how bad the AFC North is that if they beat the Steelers next week and the Ravens and the Bengals lose, the Browns will be first in the division.
Yeah, if they finish 9-8 and everybody else finishes with 9 wins or less, they would win the division because they would have the tiebreakers if the Ravens and Browns.
It's so bad. I'm trying to see how this would. Let's Bills. Yeah, I mean the Browns are still in it. There's definitely it would require a lot of crazy scenarios, but
they're not actually out of it. But
no,
yeah, I mean ostensibly they pretty much are. I think they understand. I don't think that they're they wouldn't be happy about it either. Just
they are the chaos agent. Like
right, they're just trying to cause problems at this point.
Yes,
which I can appreciate. I mean, that's
want peace. I want problems always.
Exactly. I don't know, but it's just at the end of the day, I tweeted out the article that I posted last week about the Steelers era, the Burgh era Steelers football, and I did it because it kind of just brought home my point of this is the end of this era, right?
Yeah,
this game is gonna be one of the last pieces of this era, and it's unfortunate that a game like this is part of it, but to me, it's time. Right, it's time. It's
Yeah,
time to move on in a lot of different ways.
this is the Peyton Manning versus the Bengals on Monday Night Football in 2015
Yeah.
in the rain where he was done. But he did go on and win the Super Bowl. And obviously the Steelers aren't going to do that. But I do really think that against these two divisional opponents, one of which Ben has owned his entire career, the second of which has been the Steelers' principal rival during his career.
Mhm.
I really find it hard to believe that the Steelers will find a way to lose both of these games,
Yeah.
especially the one next week, given that they'll have an extra day.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be really upset after how this game went.
Yeah.
And this whole team is really going to want to send Ben out in front of the home crowd for his last time on a good note.
Yeah, and I do think that there's a really solid chance we do win out, and that
Mhm.
whether we actually make the playoffs or not, we'll have to see how it all falls. But I just feel like, and this is one of the things I talked about, is the fact that even though he wasn't great today, especially compared to how he was a couple weeks ago, and the whole offense was just a mess, Ben isn't the worst part of this team by any means. And the fact that he isn't as a 39-year-old quarterback tells you all you need to know about the team.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's what it is at the end of the day. The fact that he's not the worst part of it means that I don't see a way for us to get better enough for him to be able to be the quarterback and actually still win. I just don't see that
I do
happening.
hate to say this, but I would probably say he is like bottom 3. Would
Oh,
you agree with that in
yeah,
terms of
but
the
like
worst parts of this team?
yeah, but just the fact, like the worst parts about really the worst part about this team for me is the offensive line, right?
Okay.
Like that's the worst part. At least that's what I'm going with.
Mhm.
The fact that that's the case makes him completely irrelevant because he cannot exist under that circumstance. It just doesn't
True.
happen.
True.
So, like by
Very fair.
default, even if he was a really good part of this team still from a just talent level standpoint, it wouldn't matter if the line is going to be this bad. And I don't see it getting that much better in one off season where it's like, oh, Ben's fine now. He's good. We don't have to worry about him anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's just not going to happen. It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. So essentially, the Steelers do need to win out to make the playoffs, I think.
Yeah.
But we'll be back later in the week with our preview of the next game. Yeah. So
That's about it.
in the meantime, Shane, let people know where they can find your work.
Well, at Shane Kubis on Twitter, and then at Steelers ATB, of course, on Twitter as well. I'm sure you saw some of my complaints that I had throughout the game before I kind of just decided I was done with it. You definitely follow us there.
You along with the CBS broadcast.
Right, the CBS broadcast team as well. But definitely keep an eye out for that every week. Definitely, like so, we're going to be back in the middle of the week sometime to just kind of preview the Browns game. Hopefully, a little bit more positive notes, especially going up against the Browns, should be a little bit less intimidating. But definitely follow us there.
Yep, and you can follow me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Make sure you're following us, everything we're broadcasting now, Around the Block YouTube, Around the Block Twitch, Steelers ATB on Twitter. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We hope to have you back next time.